This video is going to take you through how to write your methods section. Before we do that, I just want to go through and just re-emphasize the organization of the paper, with each part starting on its own separate page. First, you'll have the title page, which you've already made when you did your literature review. Next is the abstract, and you'll come back and write this abstract, and we'll talk a little bit more about that at the end of the semester before you submit your final paper. And then you have the text, the body of the paper. You already have part of that written, the literature review. Next comes the method. So the method is part of the body and it doesn't start on its own page. Next comes the results section. The same thing goes there. And the discussion as well. Then we get to the reference section. That starts on a new page as well. Then we have tables and figures that go in the appendices. So you already have your reference section done. You already have a title page done, and you already have part of the body done. What you'll come back and do at the end of the semester, we're working on the methods now. What you'll come back and do at the end of the semester is modify that literature review, modify your methods, add in a results section, add in a discussion section, create an abstract, create your tables and your figures that are going to go in your appendices, and put that all together. So just so we know, each one of these goes on a separate, starts on a separate page. All right, so for the methods sections, just to highlight here, the first level heading is centered and bolded. Second level heading is left justified, or flush left and bolded. And then this is just kind of an example of how the participants are described. Here's another second level heading, and then just describing again, what an example of what the participants did. So the methods section is going to be a relatively detailed description of how the variables were defined, how they were measured, and what the research study was done. The goal is that somebody can read this methods section and replicate your study. So we're going to have subsections of the methods section. We're going to have a participant section. We're going to have a materials subsection. We're going to have a procedure subsection, and a design and statistical analysis. Now, when you look through papers, you're going to see that often they have different. Some have participants and a procedure. Some have extra sections. This is what I decided I'm going to require for this class. So these 4 subsections are required. So you have to have a participant subsection, materials, procedure, and design and statistical analysis. So we're going to talk about each of these in a little detail. The participant subsection, it's details about the population your sample came from. Our population is going to be OCC psychology students. You want to provide demographic details. So it's important when you're designing your questionnaires and surveys and all those things that you add in questions so that you can talk about the mean age of your participants, or the age range, the gender, maybe level of college, some of you are doing music, the type of music that they like. Is there anything unique about the population they were selected from? Where did they come from? So again, we're talking about Orange Coast College students. Because we're going to do this online, you might want to mention that these participants were selected online. Did you use random selection or random assignment? We're going to try. So as you're writing your methods sections, you'll see that you may have to revise it slightly. You're going to write it. You may have to make some revisions so that it reflects accurately what we did. Was there any screening criteria? So I know some of your papers, they screen based on this is the type of music that they liked, things like that. I think most of you aren't probably going to have any screening criteria, but in case you do, that's important. Why did they participate in your study? Did they get any compensation, extra credit? Was it a requirement of a course? Again, we'll kind of some of that you might have to put in as a draft for your methods section, and then alter it a little bit for that final draft. So the important thing is that it allows the study to be replicated. And in your methods section that's due at the end of April, you're going to have to add in some mock fake numbers. You'll go back and add in those real numbers after you run the experiment. But I do expect you to have something about, even though we don't have exactly what your participants are, the mean age or age range, gender. You'll probably want to say that they're participating for extra credit, even though I think some of my students, I'll probably make it a requirement for the online class that they're completing. The next section is the materials section of your methods section. So for materials, here you're going to describe what materials you use and cite them if you got them off the internet or from a textbook, wherever you got them from. So you're going to describe the materials that are used in your experiment, any equipment that was used, any images that were shown, any testing instruments that you used, other specialized equipment. And this might be a little different since we're doing them online, but you might want to mention something about that as well, that the materials were developed and given to the participants in an online fashion. This doesn't always need to be a subsection, but the reason I decided to make it a subsection for this class is because last semester students didn't always cite where they got their, whether they had an image or a song or whatever, they didn't cite that information, which is an important part of the methods section. You may need to discuss the validity or the reliability of your measures. And again, this is what's important, is providing citations of where you found your materials. If you're using a song, is it a YouTube clip? Is it some other type of file? Where did you get that file from? So that, again, individuals can replicate your study by going and finding that information. So in addition, just to talk a little bit more specific about surveys, is that if you use a survey or a questionnaire or something like that, you're going to want to provide a citation. So again, they can find that. Some of you are using anxiety scales, some of you are using different types of, and even the reading passages that you're using, word lists you've created, all of that's going to need a citation. But for a survey, you also want, or a questionnaire, you want to provide a short description. What were the types of questions that were in there? The number of items, perhaps. There were 20 items that they had to answer. The questions all were related to X, Y, and Z. Want to say what type of response format? Was it a Likert scale? If so, describe what those that Likert scale was. Was it open response? Was it a true-false type of questionnaire? And then how do you interpret that? So again, some of you, when we were going through our private meetings, we saw that there were, sometimes they say these items were scored, for a Likert scale were scored normally, and then some were reverse scored. That's kind of an important piece of information. So again, is it a new measure? If it is, you need to discuss the construct validity. I don't know if any of you are actually designing your own measures, but if you are, we'll talk about how to discuss construct validity and how to determine construct validity in our private meetings. If it's a pre-existing or published measure, you need to include the full name followed by abbreviation and the citation of the author. That's what's important. So for example, if your survey or the questionnaire you're using is the occupational stress indicator, you would then refer to it as with the abbreviation followed by a semicolon with the author's name and citation. And then in your references, you provide that full citation. And after you use this abbreviation and you tell us what it means, you can just call it the OSI from then on. But make sure this is the correct way to abbreviate it, the correct way to put it in citations in the paper. Procedure. So here, this is the next subsection of your method section. You're going to explain what the participants did, and you're going to tell them in order what they did, so it shouldn't be out of order, it should flow. You want to be specific, where were the surveys tests done, what order were they done in, did you show them an image or a video, or did they listen to something first? Not overly detailed, but again, enough for the researcher to be able to replicate. So, and then the when, the where, the how the debriefing occurred. So here's just an example. I'm not going to go through it all, but it's an example paper that's there linked in the lecture notes that you can look at. And so here again, showing you that methods, showing you the participants. Here they combine their materials and procedure. Unless I give you approval to do so because you don't have a lot of materials, you're going to have a second subsection. And then here they even have a third level headings because of the different, like if you're doing a couple different types of tests, you might want to have a third level heading. The last subsection is the design and statistical analysis section. Here you're going to specify the research design. Was it a within subjects? Was it a between subjects? For most of you, it'll be either or. If you're doing a factorial design, you could potentially have a mixed subjects. And then discuss if it's factorial or single factor. For now, most of you are doing, in this online format, are going to do a single factor, so one independent variable with 3 levels. A few of you have an exception and are perhaps doing a factorial design or have, there's some other exceptions to the rule that I've made. So you want to make sure you understand whether you're doing a factorial or single factor design, and this is the place to describe it. What were your independent variables? How many levels did you have? What's your dependent variable? So you want to identify those IVs and those DVs, and you want to state what statistical analyses were used, or analysis was used. Sorry, improper grammar. But the idea is that was is the idea that it's past tense. So when you're writing up that methods section, you want to make sure you're using past tense. Yes, you're writing the methods section up, you're turning it in before you do anything. But it's still, by the time you turn in that final paper, it's in the past. So it's all that past tense, which we'll get to in a minute. So verb tense, past tense or present past tense. So you want to keep it consistent. You want it to be all participants. Try to think of an example. Participants were given a questionnaire to fill out. That's the idea that it's all past tense. You want to reduce biased language, be specific and accurate, be sensitive to labels. So biased language, sensitivity to labels is that some of the stuff we talked about earlier in the semester in our APA formatting, where sometimes you don't want to label a group. You want to you don't want to say autistic individuals. You want to say people who've been diagnosed with ASD. And here's an example for the levels of headings. It is updated for the 7th edition. If you click on this link up here, I believe it'll take you to an older edition, 6th edition article, but it still kind of gives you the idea. And so it tells you the first level heading centered a boldface, second level heading left a line, so on and so forth. I'm only requiring you to have first and second level headings. You may decide to add in a third level heading. And feel free, if you have reason for fourth and fifth, we just need to use it appropriately. Seriation in terms of numbered lists. There are rules for paragraph levels versus sentence levels lists. If you click here, there's also some rules. It says it's the OWL at Purdue, so they should have an updated 7th edition. And I believe I have in your APA lab, I have one place where you're going to do that as well.